So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand for a moment of silence in the pledge, and then we'll have the roll call. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Obviously, we're doing this meeting a little bit different due to COVID-19, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But Madam Recorder, if you'd please call the roll.
Chairman Floyd.
Present.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Present.
Deborah Thomas.
Present.
Jeremy Burnett.
Present.
Michelle Childs.
Present.
Superintendent Horrell.
Present.
We do have a quorum. All of our members are present. First thing I'd like to do is introduce our school board attorney, Eric Plumley. Eric, would you be kind enough to kind of give us an update of why we're doing this today and how we got here?
Sure. So this is the board's regularly scheduled meeting, but we're doing it electronically, virtually, because of the COVID-19 crisis. And to just refresh everyone's memory, because it seems like a long time ago, although it really isn't, back in March, towards the end of March, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee entered an executive order that allows local governments to meet electronically during the COVID-19 crisis. And the order, which was executive order number 16, it suspends certain portions of Tennessee's Open Meeting Act, which often is referred to as the Sunshine Law, and allows governing boards such as the Lakeland School Board to continue to meet and handle their essential functions without actually being physically present in the same room with one another, so that we can follow the guideline of not having meetings of more than 10 people. And because of that executive order, meetings like this are permitted for the time being.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Plumley. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Plumley? Hearing none. Dr. Hall, would you lead us through our agenda?
Yes, I certainly will. The first item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment, and I'll also share that we posted on the agenda that people who were interested in having public comments read at the meeting could submit those to me. I did not receive any public comment requests for this meeting, but I will say for anyone who views this one, if you would like a comment read publicly, we will read it at our regularly scheduled business meeting that will also be conducted electronically next Monday.
Thank you, Dr. Horrell. So you'll keep us up to date next week on that matter, and we'll address it if there are any comments and go from there.
Absolutely.
Next item.
Next item, we move into our reports section. First is the chairman's welcome.
Well, first, I guess I'd like to thank everyone and ask for their patience as we kind of venture into uncharted territory for us and this particular format of conducting the meeting. So we're going to do the best we can. I think we'll get through this fairly orderly, but if I'd ask for everyone's patience as we move through it. Also, I would like to say, before we move through our agenda, I'd like to thank Dr. Horrell, the superintendent, our teachers and administration. They have done an outstanding job of adapting to really an unprecedented situation, at least for Lakeland school system. And it's been remarkable. I always say great people make great school systems, and we have great people. We have great teachers, we have great central office leadership, and we have great principals. And at times like this, it shows. Our parents see it, our students see it, our community sees it. And I would like to say thank you to everyone for kind of doing the best they can under trying circumstances. It's been truly in some ways a pleasure to watch and joyful to see you, Dr. Horrell, your interaction with our community and the teachers and crossing guards. Everybody has gone out of their way to handle this in a professional manner that just, quite honestly, we couldn't ask for any more. So I'd like to say thank you, and then we'll move to our regular agenda.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments, and I'm sure everyone does. And we also, as always, appreciate the board's leadership during this time that have been involved and up to date, and just kind of providing the right direction throughout all this as well. So I thank you guys in turn. Next is the TLN representative update. My understanding from Ms. Childs is that we're going to forego that until this time next week. Is that right, Ms. Childs? We'll do the...
Yes, it's fairly lengthy, so I'll just go over the whole thing next week.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item in the reports is the superintendent's report. I do have a few things I want to share. Many of them are in line with the things that Chairman Floyd said. But I'm going to name some names, which is always dangerous. I can't name everybody's name, but really to the person in Lakeland school system, I think the reaction to this situation has been exactly what we would hope it would be. I am going to call out a few names from our leadership team in particular. I first want to say Wanda Terrell, Dr. Wanda Terrell, and Angie Deloso, my assistant superintendent, really helped lead the transition into remote learning. I want to thank and show my appreciation for Dr. Terrell in particular, who was already thinking about this, talking about this, before there were any conversations about closing school in our community, because she had the finger on the pulse of other communities that were a little ahead of us in terms of kind of dealing with the effects of this health crisis. In addition to our facilitators, Tammy Beauvais and Kim Lewis, that were a big help in those conversations. We really felt like we were kind of able to get some of the parameters set up before we even left school, which made it a much easier process once we went on spring break and had some time to really operationalize what we wanted to do. I also want to acknowledge Allison Bogue, and who is the instructional technology facilitator at Lakeland Elementary. And then I want to acknowledge and congratulate Dr. Anisha Warren Scott, who's the instructional technology facilitator at Lakeland Middle. Just today, in fact, there is good news still coming out. She defended her dissertation today and is now Dr. Anisha Warren Scott. I guess I said that at the beginning, but congratulations to Dr. Warren Scott, and thank them for their hard work. The principals and the assistant principals really marshaled the teachers and got them into action, and there was nary a negative sentiment or word. As the chairman kind of acknowledged, everybody said, what do we need to do and what does this need to look like? And from then on, their creativity and their expertise and their talent really kicked in. I want to acknowledge on the business side in particular, Jessica Millspaugh, who's also our board secretary, and our finance director, Jesse Rosales. Ms. Millspaugh is also the HR director. Very quickly, very effectively figured out what business operations from home would look like. We knew we had to keep doing payroll, benefits or continue to be a thing, even hiring. We've continued to hire throughout this for next year, and all of those things in addition to budget preparation. The bills are being paid. Ms. Rosales has been tremendous in terms of just picking up the pieces and doing them from wherever she needed to. Our school-based financial secretaries, Judy Carpenter and Latanya Parham, have continued to work from home, make sure bills are paid at the school level. Our plant managers, Steve McCain and Sylvester Parker, after they worked with our incredible team of custodians to work so hard those first few days and make sure we've had a safe building to return to whenever that is. They've also continued to meet contractors. We've got parts of the building that still have to be maintained. Backflow preventers have to be tested, as it turns out, and we've had parts of our systems that go down, and they are available and always there to take care of those things. Just to give you an idea kind of the scope of this, Ms. Terrell Dr. Terrell, made it available for our employees to use Google Voice so that they could call from home, they could call parents, they could call and take care of business and not have to use their personal cell phone number. And we had 34 staff members and rising that are taking advantage of that to make sure that they can continue to do business during this break. And y'all forgive me. I know it's a lot of people, but I want folks to know what's been going on. Kim Pickens, who is our guidance and student services facilitator, and Cindy Smith, our EIS and Skyward coordinator, they've had to adjust plans on the fly for online registration and new student registration. Ms. Beauvais and Ms. Lewis keep monitoring information about evaluation, about assessment, about personal development, and all these other areas. I also want to call out Kieran DeLeon, who is our bilingual facilitator. She's translated every document that I put out for our Spanish-speaking families so that they can be aware of what's going on as well. Getting close here. I want to thank the city staff. They've been a huge help, great communication throughout this. And then certainly the other municipal superintendents who've really shown, just as always, such leadership and just propensity for collaboration as we've tried to figure out all these things for the first time. So just a lot of thanks. And again, literally everybody has done everything that we could have hoped or expected them to do. So I'm very grateful as well for the work of our team. Just a couple of additional points in terms of the remote learning opportunities that started last Wednesday. As of today, we've had, and I know these are kind of just, they're numbers, they're hard to conceptualize, but we've had 15,719 visits to Schoology in the last 7 days at LMPS. And at LES, we've had 10,800 page views on the Remote Learning Hub. And in addition to that, 5,000 student logins to Clever. So that's 5,000 times that students were asked to do something on the Remote Learning Hub and then logged into Clever to access those resources that we've been offering. I'm going to check in. Is everybody still here? Everybody hear me? Okay. Okay. All right. Good.
Here.
Okay, the number one question that I probably get, I know board members get, and probably everybody has, is when are we coming back to school? And we put this on our FAQs. We are kind of officially now following the guidance of Governor Bill Lee, and the answer is we don't know. I don't believe he knows. I don't believe the Commissioner of Education knows. We are not officially canceling activities really or anything past the point of the current closure, but we have asked school sponsors of clubs and activities to preemptively cancel any travel, certainly for the rest of the school year. A lot of people ask about and are interested in end of year activities and whether or not those would be rescheduled if we cancel, and those are all things we certainly will look at. We hope to be able to do as much of that as is appropriate and advisable, but for right now, we're just kind of like everybody else, going with what's the latest information and what's the forecast, and just trying to make the best decisions that we can, just like all of our local and state and national leaders are trying to do. I did want to note that the state is looking at options, the State Department of Education looking at options for how to use funds that may be available through the CARES Act, which is kind of what we've been calling the federal stimulus legislation. There was a survey that went out that kind of, I think, inadvertently suggested that we might be going more days or longer days, or into summer, or extended days and some other things. Those, I want to emphasize, we put something out, but just to be clear, those are local school board decisions. Those were just options, and in fact, the Department of Education has already adjusted the survey really so it doesn't suggest those things so much. I am just continue to be encouraged by the feedback we're getting from parents and students and certainly teachers that are all just doing their best to make sure that when our kids come back, they're going to be as ready as we can possibly allow them to be under the circumstances. And, something I've tried to message is every year we meet kids where they are and pick it up from there. And that's what we will do. So that's our mission. We've got a staff that are excellent at doing that. And whenever we're all back together, which I hope is sooner rather than later, we will be undertaking that task as well. So really that concludes my report for now.
Thank you. Any questions for the superintendent?
I have one.
Ms. Harrison.
So I've had 2 questions from parents, and I'm not looking for an answer now, but just can you take it back to your team? Course selection for next year for the seventh or the rising seventh and eighth graders, what's kind of there's just been questions about what that process looks like with us doing online registration and not being at school. So just some communication there. And then a second question has, the out of town trips, the refunds. So just, I can't remember if we've had communication go out or not, but that has been a second question. What is the process for that? Is it wait till the end of the school year? So just, those are just two things that have been kind of presented to me or whatever. So I just, through work with your staff and whatever y'all are putting out, I know parents would appreciate some communication whenever y'all get that, set in stone, however that's going to work.
Yeah, course selection is already being discussed fairly heavily, and just what that process looks like exactly. So we're probably on the sooner rather than later on that one. I do know some club sponsors and organizations have already worked through. Most of them are just kind of taking it to their parents individually with what that looks like, but we can certainly try to get something more blanket, although I don't want to kind of try to speak for all these different club sponsors and organizations, but we can probably put something out in general that at least says that's where the decisions will be made.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this, and I know we run into this every year with like even eighth graders that finish school and still have money on their lunch account. What does that look like?
Sure.
So whenever we figure out what we're doing, I know that's on their frequently asked questions kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably kind of the philosophy is we're not ready to hang it up just yet.
Yeah,
even though it may feel like that someday, we're kind of hoping for the best.
Very good. Dr. Horrell, I don't believe we've met since the legislature kind of passed some laws that affected our school system as it relates to testing and mandatory attendance. Can you kind of give us an update of how all that went down?
Sure, I sure can, and I will say, just for the public who hasn't seen that a lot of these are addressed on there's an FAQ on our website, and there's a nice big blue button for coronavirus COVID-19 resources, and we do address some of those questions that came out of the legislation. Essentially, though, probably the big leads of that state legislation that, to their credit, our state legislators basically stayed amidst, even when we kind of knew that there was some danger of being with other people. They made the best of it, and I think really passed something that addressed nearly all of the concerns that were being expressed by local school systems in terms of giving us the flexibility that we needed to kind of exhale and then start looking towards the future. One of the major ones was that they waived the 180-day school requirement. We actually previously had been meeting that because we go longer days. So our school year was 175 days, but that was all based on approvals. That has been completely waived. So there is no obligation to make up those days. There's no obligation to finish school. Very technically, a school board or school system could decide right now that we were done for the year, and there would be kind of a hold harmless for the students and the school systems under those situations. So that was a big one. The other big one was that they did just very clearly say there are not going to be assessments this year. So there were some situations, I think, where the districts could access assessments, but I don't know that anybody's doing that. Honestly, I think that there will not be. We're not taking the test. There won't be results from the test. Obviously, there will not be A to F grading for schools and school systems. The test will not negatively impact teacher evaluations or really negatively impact anything. So those were really probably the two major decisions that came out of that allowed us to kind of start planning on what do things look like now. I will say the state board of education, because there is we have local boards of education, and there's also the state of Tennessee Board of Education, and they actually write and approve the kind of the rules by which schools and school systems are approved. So just kind of a civics lesson. A lot of time the legislature will write laws, and they will say that it's the State Board of Education, or sometimes the Tennessee Department of Education's job to operationalize those things. So usually it's the legislature, and then the State Board of Education, and then the commissioner and the Department of Education. and then down to the local school system. So we are waiting to hear some fairly important decisions about particularly high school grades. What do those look like for students that have only completed 3/4 of the school year, which most kids in the state are going to be in that situation. For our K through 8 students who are not taking high school classes, and we do have a few that are taking Algebra 1 and Spanish 1 and Physical Science, or the 3 kind of high school classes that our kids take. For the rest of us, for the K-8 classes, what we would anticipate is that most likely the report card will just be as it is. There will be a first semester, there will be a third 9 weeks, there will likely be some sort of whether you call it an NA, not applicable, or an asterisk or something that just notes that 9 weeks was not completed due to COVID-19. And there's not really much of an impact on, what that means for those students moving forward. I initially thought that the school board would have to make a decision about those grades, and just the more we've dug into it, the more kind of research and reflection we've done, it seems like that's not necessary. So in fact, I had an agenda item as a placeholder that we decided does not require any board action. Frankly, because the State Department of Education will make the decision on the high school courses, and the rest of it is kind of not necessary to act upon.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Horrell. Any other questions for the superintendent? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Okay. The next item is the approval of the agenda, which is not necessary in a work session. We don't have a consent agenda because this is the work session. So we move into our discussion items. And first is the approval of the business meeting minutes from March 9th, 2020.
Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is a presentation on the fiscal 2020-2021 budget.
Dr. Horrell, I see your name beside it, so why
All
don't
right.
you lead us off?
Okay, so I'm going to attempt, hopefully successfully, to put this on the screen so everybody can see it. I do want to kind of give just an introduction to this. And again, I want to recognize in particular Jesse Rosales, our finance director, who does so many of the nuts and bolts of what the budget looks like. And then also Jessica Millspaw, the HR director, does a lot of the salary schedule computations to figure out what the impacts of various scenarios are on the budget. Because as you know, the vast majority of really any business's budget is in personnel, and ours is certainly no exception. So what I'm going to present today is just kind of an overview to let the board and the public know kind of what are the differences primarily between the budget we've been working with and the budget that I'm bringing to you this time. I do want to note, because I don't think I mentioned in the slide, we are anticipating some changes, obviously, to budget revenues, the economy, obviously, and sales tax revenue are in a very different situation than they were during the month and a half prior that we had been working on the budget. So we did try our best to adjust for that in 2 ways. One, Governor Bill Lee had announced in his budget, which was met with a lot of support and acclaim by the legislature, that he was going to put a significant amount of money into teacher salaries in particular. He has since, I think for obvious reasons, come back and said, we're not going to be able to go as far as we thought we were going to go. And we're also assuming that he may not be able to go anywhere at all in terms of enhancements from the state funding to our budget. So we've kind of pulled those dollars back out of the budget. And we've also adjusted our sales tax revenue by about $700,000 less than what it would have been, which is, I meant to do this number right before. I think it's between 15 and 20% less than what we normally would have projected. That being said, it's very possible, because we don't know how long this will be going on. We don't quite know what the situation will be. More than any other year, this is always the case, but more than any other year, we might have to bring the budget back and make some changes to what we've done. But as always, and I'm very proud of this. We're very conservative in our revenue estimates. We're very conservative in our expenditure estimates, and I feel pretty good about all that being said, that we'll be able to move forward with the budget that we're discussing. But I did want to add that caveat for obvious reasons based on where we are. So what I'm going to do now is present the budget document to you, hopefully. And if y'all will let me know when it pops up.
It's up.
Okay. All right. Let me get to it and put it on full screen here. Okay. Have you got the full screen view now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so this is, as I said, the budget overview, and just so the public knows, over the course of the next week, I will set up individual meetings with each of the board members to review this with them personally and individually. Those meetings should be the easiest to set up than they ever have been, I would guess, but we'll see. All right, so I always like to start with some of the budget assumptions for this budget. Most of the budget is, in terms of revenues, is driven by the number of students that we have in our system. We've been fortunate that ever since Lakeland school system began, we have always wound up with more students than we anticipated, and usually which means that we've usually wound up with more funds than we anticipated. We've tried to get better and better at this. We found it's not an exact science, no matter how hard we try. But what we're budgeting based on is an additional 120 students between the two schools in our system. So we're working under the assumption that we'll have 1,000 students at LES and 900 students at LMPS. I do want to say at LES in particular, that does not count our preschool population typically. Even though we do pay for those teachers largely out of the, almost entirely, in fact, out of the general fund budget, they don't typically go into the regular student counts historically. That includes, our budget includes 52 regular teachers at LES. Those are just regular classroom teachers, which is an increase of 4 teachers and an increase of 3 teachers at what I'm going to go ahead and start calling LPS, which is Lakeland Preparatory School, since the name change will come into effect next year, and we're talking about next year. So that would be 37 teachers being budgeted for at LPS, Lakeland Preparatory School. The other assumptions, and this first one has not changed in the 6 years that we've been doing this in terms of budgets. There are no requests for additional operational funds from the City of Lakeland. I do want to note, obviously, we are getting, in fact, we've already received a large amount of capital funding from the City of Lakeland, but school systems also are often dependent on their cities or municipalities or counties for requests for additional operational funds, and we have never requested any additional operational funds beyond the 15-cent property tax equivalent that's required by law. We also have kind of fallen into a groove of making budgeted contributions to our OPEB, which is our other post-employment benefits fund that we participate in, at $150,000, and then we have been able to, so far, to supplement that with fund balance each year that we've been in operation. All right, so what that winds up being is an increase of total revenues from $16.48 million, which was the most recent budget amendment, to $17.74 million, which is largely explained by the additional students that we have, that we are anticipating, rather. Some of which we already have. All right, we are also assuming no blanket increases in the salary schedules in anticipation of further revisions to the governor's education budget. Earlier drafts did contemplate that. If the governor is going to give you money for teacher salaries, even if it's not the amount of money that he or others might suggest, could go towards teacher salaries. We do try to honor that. However, we are going to hold that line. I do want to make it clear, though, we are going to provide the step increases to all employees that are on step schedules in this budget. And there have been years historically in Shelby County schools and certainly in other school systems where not only do the teachers not get raises, but they also don't move up on their step schedules. But we have not done that ourselves yet. All of our teachers have moved up their steps basically for years of service, which is what that means. All right, and I do want to make it clear we could evaluate potential bonuses depending on the governor's final budget for teacher salaries once we know what that is, but we decided it would be prudent to go ahead and leave that out at this point. And we did, I'm sorry, it was a 28% reduction in sales tax revenue. I guess I did calculate it on the sales tax revenue line item. So it's removing $700,000 from the sales tax revenue line item. And this does include an increase in the health insurance premiums of 6%, which is actually kind of below the industry standard of 9% right now. So we were pleased that we were able to just do a modest health insurance premium increase. But we do acknowledge that, you know, no matter how much it is, it definitely impacts teachers, particularly, those teachers that are on the health insurance plan. All right, so as we mentioned, kind of moving into the enhancements to the budget, we're going to add 4 regular ed teachers at LES, 3 regular ed teachers at LPS, the addition of 1 functional skills teacher at LES, so that's in addition to the regular ed teachers, obviously. The addition of 1 regular ed assistant at LES. We've really this next one, we're going to increase, or we're proposing an increase in the hours for our bilingual facilitator position. That is Ms. DeLeon, who I kind of name checked earlier. She's currently working 20 hours a week, and frankly, the teachers they have so much for her to do and help with. She assists with phone calls with parents. She assists with IEPs and conferences. She helps translate documents. She's been an incredible resource, and the teachers just can't get enough of her, frankly, or of this position. So we would transition that from a part-time position to a full-time position. This is another significant one. We are proposing to increase our substitute teacher pay from $90 to what it was back before the merger to $110 a day to both recognize our great substitutes that we contract in-house, or hire in-house rather, and also to make sure we're competitive with other school systems that are basically competing for the same substitute pool. All right, we are proposing the creation of a math interventionist position that would be shared between both schools. We currently have 1 interventionist at each school that's paid for out of federal funds largely, but they also tend to focus on English and ELA, English Language Arts intervention, and the math need is obviously there as well. And so we wanted to create this position and start it as a single position that would be split. This one is significant and frankly, I think overdue. And I want to recognize former board member Jeff Hicks, who had in particular advocated for this prior to moving off the board. But our custodial staff are in-house. They are some of the most valuable folks that we have. They're very loyal. They work hard. As I noted, they were the ones that were in the building after everybody else left, really putting themselves at some risk, frankly, to make sure that the buildings are clean. And we had 2 tiers of our custodians that was based on some of them being part-time, and it was about $3 less than the full-time custodians. And we just it became increasingly kind of I guess odious to think about, that just because they weren't working full-time, that their work was not valued as much, because I assure you that it is. So what we did is we eliminated that tier, which basically moves up the starting custodial base pay by more than $3 an hour, and all steps by all of the steps on the step schedules by $1 an hour. So we get them much closer to the $15 an hour mark. That's really kind of become even just kind of a national talking point. But I think it's more than deserved by our custodians. Certainly, the lower one really was needed to be addressed immediately, and I think the $1 an hour increase is also well deserved from our custodians. And in turn, we want to look at our regular ed assistant position pay that has kind of inadvertently lagged behind. I think even rare for us, lagged behind other school systems. So we would move that step 0 or starting pay to $14 an hour. It's currently at $12.82 an hour. This one is a position that we introduced last year, and we learned a lot really from this position, and we added a Special Education Facilitator Position, and got a wonderful person who's done an outstanding job in special education. But really the way we hired for and hired the position, we didn't require an administrative endorsement or an endorsement in administration. And what we found is, because the special education world is so specific, there's so many legal implications. To give context, Angie DeLoso, who does both academics and special ed and has a background in both, this position was intended to kind of take some decision making and kind of hands-on work off her. And what we found is that without that administrative endorsement and kind of that experience and level of authority that comes with that, we weren't really able to negate some of the work from Ms. DeLoso that we intended. So we are shifting this into a special education supervisor position requiring an administrative endorsement. And interestingly enough, it's not actually a huge financial difference in the way that we're approaching the two positions, because before we were paying like a teacher position, and with the experience and education of the previous employee that was doing that actually is staying on with us and has shifted into a classroom position. It winds up being fairly budget neutral. It's at least close. And then we also are looking to create a new full-time HR administrative assistant position. This in essence replaces the half-time shared position that we currently have with the city. That's an HR payroll clerk is what we call it. And she works half-time with the City of Lakeland and half-time with us. And this would be more of a kind of a administrative assistant secretarial position, which also causes it to be fairly close to budget neutral, even though we're going from a half-time amount to a full-time amount. This person would be able to assist Ms. Millspaw and the other central office staff as necessary, including to help me in certain situations as well. And likewise, the technology support technician that handles network and infrastructure for technology is currently half-time shared with the city, and that will become a full-time position for us. And we've actually been anticipating that for some time. And in fact, that was in last year's budget that would be the case. So this one is not much of a hit as well. All right, and that concludes the overview. There are obviously details in the budget that I'll go over with the individual board members at their meetings this week, and then we can address any questions that they have at the business meeting next week. But I'm going to kind of unshare my screen here and
welcome back.
All right, here we are.
We'll take questions for the superintendent. I saw Ms. Child's hands first, and then we'll go to Ms. Thomas. Ms. Child.
Okay, I had two questions. My first question is for substitute pay, what are most schools locally paying?
I would have to go, I guess system by system. I know some of them are up to the 110. I'm going to put Ms. Millspaw on the spot. Do you recall, Ms. Millspaw, those conversations?
There are some districts that are definitely at that 110 mark. I would say there are some that are between what we are doing in the 110. I believe there might even be some, I don't know if in the municipals that are over 110, but I know there are some that might be slightly even over that. So I think to be competitive, I think the 110 mark would be reasonable.
Oh, for sure. I was just more of just wanting to get the information, but that
Sure.
sounds like a solid plan. And my second question was, I guess it's kind of related, but can you speak to, with the whole, our current situation with being out of school right this minute, as far as if all of, to tell the citizens, if all the staff that we have and all the teachers and staff, if they all have been paid, will be paid, if any positions were let go or not let go, because I know I've heard from friends in other parts of the country that like non-teachers were all let go and things like that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because I think that's one of the, I hope, I don't know if success is the right word, or bright spot or silver lining maybe to this process. We are in the position, based on the way the school system is funded and based on the decisions that were made by the legislature, we are in the position to have continued to pay and will continue to pay, and we know that at least through this school year, every employee that works directly for Lakeland school system. And I'll say with the exception of substitute teachers. The substitute teachers are not substituting, and they're not being paid. But literally everybody else who's an employee of Lakeland school system is continuing to be paid throughout this, as if they were working their regular shifts. And I'll say in some cases we've got people that are, in fact, most of our teachers would probably tell you they're working as hard, if not harder, to kind of make this adjustment every single day. I can tell you that everybody I've talked to has been willing to do anything that's asked. I call people throughout every single day, and they're all available, and they all respond, and most of them are even being as proactive as they can. But no, it's been, I think it's, it's been a blessing, I think, for our employees and for me and for the folks in this situation to know that that's not something that they've got to worry about.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Thomas.
You mentioned that the adjusted budget took into account $700,000 less in revenue. Well, I know we've got our second payment due to the city at the end of June, correct?
Yes.
So can you speak to whether we're still okay making the payment to the city like we planned, and if that still leaves us in a good position in our fund balance? And then maybe speak to the question I've been hearing a lot about, which is what's going on with construction, to kind of let parents know what's going on there with the high school.
Sure. Thank you for both those questions. You made a very cogent connection there with the $700,000. And what I'll tell you is what we had done initially with our first draft of the budget was to take the $700,000 that we will soon owe the city to help subsidize the USDA loan. We were going to put it in the general fund and try to not take it out of fund balance. We felt like we might be in a position to go ahead and do that and then keep that fund balance set aside, even though that was not the initial intention. The thought of when we first pursued the MOU with the city to make those contributions, the thinking was at the time we would take it out of fund balance, and if we continued to contribute to fund balance, we'd be in a good position to do that. Once the COVID-19 hit, frankly, and we started looking at the sales tax, hit, it just turns out that was a number that was in line with some of the recommendations we've been getting. We've been getting between, 15 to 20, possibly 25% lower. And so we just made the decision, kind of late breaking, let's take that out of the general fund for now and just assume that we're going to pay it out of fund balance as we had originally thought. We're very comfortable with the amount that's in fund balance. Again, we calculated that MOU proposal based on the fund balance and not necessarily keeping all of it. So that would have been probably an embarrassment of riches to be able to pay it out of the general fund, but we decided that in light of it, we would make that adjustment. So does that answer your question? We're still right on track for that. The second question, I'm really glad you asked that. I should have included that in my report because I know it is on folks' minds, and we're certainly spending as much time as ever on it. I can assure everybody that we are continuing to move forward with the planning for the high school wing of Lakeland Preparatory School. In fact, we've got a design meeting tomorrow, and the engineers, the architects, the contractor, Chris Woods Construction, our consultants that we work with, they've all continued to be available. We are working differently. We don't all meet in the same room anymore. In fact, we do things like this, and it's mainly on the phone, but we can still very effectively, we've learned look at plans on a screen. In some kind of case, it's even more convenient to look at them on a small screen instead of on a big screen in a conference room. So to answer your question, we're still moving forward. I did ask the question pretty, soon after everybody went home. Does anybody see any potential to impact the timeline? And the two kind of important messages were, one, as we always have, we've built in, this is the contractor talking and the architects, we feel like we built in more than enough time so that even if there was, some shift in the timeline, we don't see anything that would cause us to affect either the athletic field deadline of August of 2021 or the high school ninth grade opening in August of 2022. The other thing that they said, which is fair, was we think we're fine until something happens that makes us think we're not. So far, that hasn't happened. There obviously, contractors and construction is considered essential. There are multiple ways, evidently, for folks that are doing construction to work safely if they take the right precautions. And again, right now we're still in design with the thought that we would break ground this summer. So probably in June, mid-June, or late June, possibly. So we're still on track. I don't, from my perspective and from a planning perspective, literally nothing has changed. And as long as we kind of keep proceeding down where we think we are, even with social distancing and stay at home orders and those things, we don't see a situation where we would be impacted unless this thing were to become something more than it is, which is not to minimize what it is, but in terms of affecting the school construction, we're not seeing that being an issue right now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions for the superintendent? Ms. Harrison?
I have a couple. So, and I can list them out so that you can just address them when you get a chance or as you go through. So the first one is, I think I heard you say the Special Education Facilitator position is being changed or moved, or we're going to add a Special Education Supervisor. So we're going to change that job. So the person that was doing it, are they qualified to move into it, or they're going to move into another position in the school system and we're going to add that?
She has actually already accepted a position at Lakeland Elementary as a special education resource teacher, and she's been amazing. So, yeah.
So we're going to post that position. Okay. But we're just going to change the description and title. Okay, understand.
Well, so technically, if you wanted to be as technical as you can, we are eliminating the Special Education Facilitator position, and we are creating a new position that is a Special Education Supervisor. Okay,
got it. The regular education assistant, the pay increase, is it just the step 0 that is changing, or is it in the pay amount, or is it all the steps that are changing in the pay amount?
It's all the steps. It's all the steps.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the last was, we're adding a regular education assistant at LES. Do you know what that brings the new total of LES ed assistants to?
Did you say SPED or regular ed?
Regular education, that we're adding a regular ed. Did I get that right?
We're adding a regular ed assistant position at LES, correct.
And do you know what that brings the new total to that we have at LES?
I don't, but I can get you that. Yep.
Okay.
We'll have it for next time. Yep. Okay.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Hearing none, I'll just sort of recap how this process will work. Dr. Hurl's going to meet with all of us individually via some sort of teleconference or video conference, and then we'll all vote next week on the budget. We'll have the opportunity to discuss this again. We'll carry this item over to our regular agenda for next week. It will not be in our consent agenda. So we'll have the opportunity to discuss this and answer any questions that anybody has next week as well. Having said that, if there's no more discussion on this item, we'll move to the next item.
All right, the next item is discussion action on approval of FY 2021 salary schedules. I did, just so everybody knows, I left that here as a placeholder. We typically have, and the board will approve, a full list of all the salary schedules. I wanted to kind of get through the overview, since there are some salary schedules impacted there, and also through our meetings with the board members, just to make sure that there was a general level of comfort with the direction. We will actually share those salary schedules with the board members this week, and they will be on the agenda for next week.
So we'll just carry this item over.
Correct. That's right.
Then we'll move to the next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the FY 1920 budget amendment.
Dr. Horrell?
All right. Board members, you have this, and it is available on the agendas page of the Lakeland School System website. The two main things that happen here, one is kind of routine. The Fund 142 changes is their federal programs budget, as the board has learned to appreciate, I guess. These numbers kind of change in terms of the amounts that we're allocated from the state. So they say, here's your new budget, and we calculate that and get it approved by the board. So we don't really have a lot of say. It's not really very discretionary in most cases. The two things that you will see up at the top of that document under the 141, there is a budget amendment that is $1 million for land. And this is kind of a conversation from, gosh, I don't know, a year and a half, it may even be 2 years ago, where the board had approved moving forward with the kind of identification and research on a piece of land for a future elementary school, which we know we're going to need at some point. It's not imminent, but Dr. Mitchell in particular has really kind of encouraged us to follow what was old Shelby County school practice of buy land well before you need it, particularly in an area like Lakeland that continues to be developed, and pieces of land that might be suitable for a school will become in shorter and shorter supply, particularly those that have utilities available and are an appropriate location for schools will become in shorter supply. So long story short, this is something we've been talking about for a long time. Dr. Mitchell and I have continued to look to identify property, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand that something is imminent, but we have never formally put it in our budget to purchase the property. So what we're saying here is that we would do that for this year, just in case we got into a situation where we did identify a piece of land and wanted to make an offer to bring back to the board. If that happened before July 1st, this would allow us to have the money in the bank, not in the bank, I'm sorry, in the budget formally. We have the money in the bank. It would be from fund balance. And I do want to let everybody know, every fund balance calculation that we've done, and the board knows this, when we look at our fund balance, we always pull out certain things. And one of the things we've been pulling out for a while is this $1 million for land for a future elementary school, because it's been contemplated for some time. So we're just formalizing this and putting us in a position. We're in a stranger position. When we first talked about doing this, it was kind of pre-COVID-19. It makes it harder to get out and look at land, I guess. But this would allow us to pursue that if it was appropriate. And then the last one, all the way at the bottom, is we had a difference, kind of a discrepancy. We had initially, when we had talked about the MOU with the city, to build the soccer fields over there, we had talked about a $3 million number, and that's what wound up in the budget. In effect, by the time we did all the negotiation and the calculation, it was really 3.2. So we're just shoring that up so that all the numbers match the numbers that were in the city's books, and in our budgets are all matching. So that's just a $200,000 kind of true up there. That's the amount that was actually given to us.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
All right. The next item is discussion action on capital improvement plan.
Dr. Horrell.
All right. This was added to the agendas and minutes page as well. This will really not have any surprises for anybody. There's a couple of reasons that we're doing this. One, it's good practice to update the 5-year capital improvement plan. 2, this was something that was requested by the City of Lakeland to get our updated plan. They're pursuing a new kind of format for the city budget, and if people don't know, once the school board approves our budget, then it's actually presented and passed on to the City of Lakeland as a part. It's essentially a fund of their budget. And so this essentially is all numbers that we've seen before, but these are the numbers that we've been allocated for and unspent for the high school construction project and some leftover funds from the athletic complex project that we still have left over, interestingly, even after the enhancements that we've done there. And it does contemplate some money from Shelby County Schools in the future, but doesn't really contemplate different uses of that other than to support the high school project. So not a lot of news here, I suppose. Just so we know, the $1 million, because we're approving that as part of this year's budget, would not go into the FY21, which is the 2021 budget. So we're just asking for a formal approval of this so it could become our updated capital improvement plan.
Very good. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to carrying this over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the always exciting discard list. The discard list is available through a link on the agenda, and I appreciate Ashley Harper, Logan Alchokachi, and Wanda Terrell, who are all involved with, and actually the instructional technology facilitators as well. These are the things that do not have any use for our school system anymore, and we never say that lightly. We certainly squeeze as much use as we can out of every bit of technology that we have. Sometimes the technology becomes outdated and faster than others, but these are things we can't squeeze anymore. So state law has some procedures by which a school system can get rid of surplus property, and this is part of that process.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. Sorry, Mr. Burnett.
Dr. Hurl, just one question on, there's 2 iMacs listed here that say shred. I'm just confused. How do we shred an iMac?
I wondered that too.
So Wanda Terrell is actually on the call because she set up this stream. Wanda, are you able to answer that question?
I can. So we usually contract with an e-waste company that comes in and takes the stuff. If it has a hard drive in it and has any possibility of containing any personal information, either of staff or students, they shred that device for us and give us a certificate of destruction in response.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. That is Dr. Wanda Terrell, our Director of Technology. Thank you, Wanda.
Very good. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none. Any objection to carrying this item over to our consent agenda? Hearing no objection, we'll carry this item over to our consent agenda. Next item.
The next and last item is just our housekeeping review of Policy Manual Section 6, the first half of that Policy Manual review. And we can discuss that at the next meeting if there are any changes to Policy Manual Section 6 that we feel like are appropriate. But this is I always bring this up. I think one of the things our system does really well is follow the intent of the state law. Laura Harrison really set us up with this procedure and was kind of the lead in creating the policy review committee. And it's certainly actually reassuring to me to know that, and hopefully to the community to know that every year somebody's putting eyes on every single policy, because it's easy to be overwhelmed by them and to let them kind of fall into where they don't mean much anymore if you're not keeping up with them. So Deborah Thomas now takes the lead on that, and we've caught some really good things to catch, and we'll continue to try to do so.
Very good. We'll just carry this item over to our regular agenda for next week. Any other business that needs to come before the board? Are there any announcements?
Isn't online registration still happening?
Well, that's a good question. We actually we extended the deadline of online registration. We are not where we'd like to be. In fact, I'll tell you, as of now, and just to remind everybody, online registration, I mean, the COVID-19 situation and cancellation happened just smack dab in the middle of it, and we're certainly understanding that people began to think about and do other things. So we did extend it, but we're going to kind of keep doing that. Let's see, where to go. Okay, we had 946 students, current students, register for online enrollment. So that's returning online registration. So far, we've only had 9 students do the new student registration. So we're going to continue to get the word out on that. And we also had a conversation today about working with the principals and the attendance operator. And this is actually typical. We'd be doing this if we were in school or not. And have them start calling the parents of the returning students and try to find out, what their intentions are, so we can plan.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas.
I just wanted to say, I know these are strange times, and our teachers are so good at reaching out to the kids. Even before there was kind of a process in place, teachers were sending messages on Remind saying, everything will be fine, don't worry about it, enjoy time with your family, stay safe. And I know kids crave that kind of contact and those connections. And I know our teachers love our kids, and I just wanted to compliment all of our teachers for being a nice, centering, calm amidst this storm. We really appreciate every one of you.
Well said.
Any other announcements? Mr. Burnett.
I just wanted to follow up to what Ms. Thomas said and tell Ted, you are the calm in the storm for your team. And I know you listed a bunch of names at the beginning of tonight's meeting, but just share that with everyone on your team, your entire staff, that I've not heard a single negative word. I've heard some questions from parents that have reached out to me, like Ms. Harrison said, but your entire staff has been so on top of this and made people feel so comfortable, and to hear that there are other municipalities that look to you when they're talking to the state level as the guiding voice out of Shelby County, just speaks volumes to your leadership and to the team that you selected and brought on board.
Thank you.
It's
a great team. It's a great team for sure.
Any other comments or announcements? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.